We are live on FM, AM, and worldwide on our online live stream at aneighborschoice.com. Don't forget to put your email in on our homepage where you'll get our weekly update with our content highlights, including online-only exclusives, videos, deep dives in nutrition, anthropology, history, the whole works. We've got a virtual academy basically for free at your fingertips at aneighborschoice.com on the topics most interesting in the world. Joining me now for a little bit of foreign policy and world affairs analysis is our friend in the Tampa Bay area, Sir Owen. How are you, sir?
Wonderful, David. It's a pleasure to be with you. How are you?
Good. And you do okay through the storms and everything?
Yes, and we were very fortunate. Of course, we're very, very sorry for our friends and neighbors down in Fort Myers and Sanibel Captiva, one of our favorite areas. They didn't do so well. We're sorry for their misfortune, but we're certainly very grateful for the fact that we were spared a direct hit here in Tampa.
Yes, and, it was stunning to see some of the videos of the causeway, everything just blown up like a disaster movie over there and underwater, and we just hope that they can rebuild and get on their way without too much more suffering in store. Hopefully things will start smoothing out there in terms of getting everything back in order and getting people in homes where they need to be. But I wanted to talk about some of the bigger global issues that are affecting the whole planet right now as well, that you and your background in geopolitical study might be able to give us insight into. The Guardian says, Putin and the Prince, fears in West as Russia and Saudi Arabia deepen ties. And I go to another story. This is in CNBC, and they say OPEC to cut oil production by 2 million barrels per day to shore up prices, defying U.S. pressure. So it looks like the Biden administration, we did so much for Saudi Arabia. We carried water for them for 9/11, everything else, who knows what else. And yet they've burned all that dastardly love for that country. They've already burned all their goodwill up because apparently Saudi Arabia is finding more interest in hanging out with Russia now. What's going on here?
Well, I think it's, OPEC, this situation, I've been following it as well. The OPEC Plus, they call it, is going to cut their production by 2 million barrels a day. And
is that like Disney Plus, where it's a subscription model?
I'm sorry?
I said, is that like a Disney Plus where you subscribe, OPEC Plus, you get an automatic subscription to their oil?
Yes, it is, actually. and I think it's without ads, that sort of thing. But
yeah.
But at any rate, the oil prices had fallen for them from $80 a barrel. They were down to $80 a barrel. They were $120 a barrel in early June. And there were concerns at the prospect of a global recession. So the oil has gone down to $80. And as I understand it, the Saudis need $80 a barrel minimum just to service their own national economic commitments. There are several very large-scale projects that they are developing and building in the kingdom at the moment, a mega city, something I think it's 70 or 100 miles long, very strange looking, interesting looking, but it's a $1 trillion project, that sort of thing. And MBS has some very, very, grandiose ideas for development. And of course, they are preparing for the day. They look at the West, and they look at the EU, and they look at these nations, the Greens, who are pushing for a green policy. And all of those things, of course, will have a negative impact on the oil prices. And so I think that they're simply realigning, perhaps looking at Russia as Russia and China and perhaps even India and others begin to realign themselves to what is called the global south, the other half of the population. But are looking at the green movement. The green movement is anti-oil, anti-petroleum, anti-petrochemicals. The other factor is I think that MBS had our president, Mr. Biden, Mr. Biden came over to visit with him. And I think that MBS, when he met him, realized that there's really no one in control of the White House. And I think there's a great deal of concern about Washington and American leadership at the moment, and the question about who really is in control and how do you make a deal with America anymore. So I think it's just normal they're backing up a bit from us, and but it is interesting at this particular moment that they should cut their production by 2 million barrels a day. Many people were talking about that they would cut it by 500,000 barrels a day, but they went the whole hog and took the 2 million. And this is a time when we are just, now that we have the problem with the Nord Stream sabotage and that sort of thing, everything seems to be converging here. And it just seems like a perfect storm of one little particular disaster after another, and one only hopes that these are coincidental and not some sort of a plan, but it could well be some sort of plan.
Right. Meanwhile, Biden is in the headlines today for the circus media because he said no one blinks with a Biden. So he's a tough guy, and he's really ready to take charge on the world stage, Owen.
Well, it's hard. I'm almost sorry for the man, because you look at him, and any reasonable person knows that there is something psychologically or physically or he has some illness. The man is simply not there. He talks to spirits in the audience and forgets where he is. And I mean, and this brings up the question, and I'm sure that our allies and everyone around the world must wonder, who is running and who is making decisions in Washington? It's certainly not our chief executive officer, Mr. Biden, or his vice president, who seems to be very quiet and a very unobtrusive, to say the least, vice president. So if you were a head of state in another country, and looking over here at supposedly your benefactors and your protectors, which is the supposition, I mean, basically, what would you think looking at America? We do have a problem. It's not to be ugly to the man or to disrespect him in any way, but he has a problem. And he doesn't know who he's talking to half the time,
right?
Or what he's talking about. So who is it that we should be very concerned about that? Especially who makes a decision, for instance, about a nuclear war? Who makes a decision to keep the cap on the evil genie and not let it out of the bottle? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not President Biden. I will just say that.
And speaking of concern for nuclear war, of course, you mentioned the sabotage Nord Stream pipeline. Jeffrey Sachs, got a lot of hate and chiding from the media for daring to suggest that America or someone interested with America may have had a role in that. And what have you seen in some of your reading of that story? Is there any indication of further evidence that's developed so far to give us an insight into who was behind that?
Well, I only know when I check sources that I can rely on. I mean, it's virtually impossible to know, even for the Central Intelligence Agency or for any of the agencies, to know what is going on, because it is such a convoluted situation. You have to start with what you know in commercial intelligence or in the intelligence world, and things that are known is until September the 26th, of this year, the EU was mainly supplied with gas by Russia. And the gas was delivered through one of three ways. It was, one is the Brotherhood pipeline, which is a pipeline from Russia through the Ukraine. The second one is the Nord Stream pipeline. And there's a Brotherhood pipeline, which is through the Ukraine. Three ways that the EU could get power. And then you have a Nord Stream pipeline. That's Nord Stream 1, if you want to say that. And then there's a thing called Turkish Stream. Well, I believe my hypothesis is that Washington has cut off these three routes in succession. The Brotherhood pipeline is still functioning. That's the one through Ukraine. But it can be interrupted at any time by Kiev, by the Zelensky government. Nord Stream has been sabotaged. Now they got Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2. And Turkish Stream, which can no longer be maintained due to the sanctions that the EU has adopted upon orders from Washington against Russia. So basically, Washington has shut down every one of these lines, or can shut down and controls them, if they were in fact implicated in the sabotage, the terrorist action against the Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2. So up until September the 26th, when everything went to hell here, the economy of the Union, of the EU, was based on the production of German industry. They carried, they are the economic powerhouse of the EU. So by cutting off the Nord Stream, Washington destroyed German industry. When they insisted Nord Stream 2 not come online, and if they were implicated in the shutdown of Nord Stream 1. What is it? Who was it? Lord Ismay, I think. He was the first Secretary General of the Washington-led NATO. He said that the aim of the Anglo-Saxons was to keep the Americans in, the Russians out, and the Germans under control. And they certainly now are under control. And so what is going to happen now, this deepening energy crisis in Europe following the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines, creates a real serious contradiction here. There is no knowing how this might be reconciled, but the Russian government has announced that it is going to have a meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss these incidents on the Nord Stream gas pipeline, which they are labeling as sabotage. The Baltic pipeline was coincidentally inaugurated, and this is just amazing. I mean, if you think about it, the Baltic pipeline was brought online a few hours after the sabotage. And at the ceremony was the Polish president, the Danish prime minister, and the Norwegian energy minister. It doesn't have the same capacities as Nord Stream, the functioning line, not Nord Stream 2, but Nord Stream. But it will be enough to change the entire EU commercial and industrial dynamic. Because until just now, the European Union it was totally dominated by German industry using Russian gas. And now it will be dominated by Poland using Norwegian gas via this new Baltic pipeline that just coincidentally inaugurated a few hours after this sabotage, if it was sabotage. And I believe it was. I believe we'll find out. I mean, things that have to be, and this is just going to be one of those things.
Now, what did Germany ever do to cross D.C. so bad? Why is Germany getting kicked in the face again? And will they start to rise up and get more aggressive back? What does Germany have within its options here?
There is an institutional, historic fear in Washington of a German-Russian alliance, because that would be such a powerhouse. The German know-how and technical expertise and manufacturing capability linked up with the natural resources of Russia. And it's a natural thing to happen, really. But and it would change the dynamic, and it would, quote unquote, threaten the global hegemon, which is Washington. And that's not an opinion, that's just a fact. this has been a locked-in institutional fear since the 40s, right after the Second World War, and it just gets passed down and goes into that echo chamber of Washington D.C. and rattles around and creates all this cognitive dissonance and a lot of problems in the world, in my opinion. But anyway, I'm not sure. This act of war committed against Russia, and it really is an act of war against Russia, whoever did it. It's not only an act of war against Russia, it's an act of war against Germany, the Netherlands, and France, because there are the three owners of the pipeline are of those countries: Germany, Netherlands, and France.
Right.
It's much more important than what has gone on before here and all this Ukraine strife and everything. If the United States is involved in attacking its allies, because that's what's happened. You've cut off their energy here. There's been much speculation heretofore concerning all the Straussian neocons who are looking for provocations in the Ukraine of why it has happened, what has happened. But what has just happened, if Washington is implicated, it supports this entire neocon Straussian project and its grand strategy, which, as I said, hasn't changed since the early 50s after the Second World War.
Wow.
So
yeah.
I know that that's a disturbing thesis, but it is a plausible hypothesis to view the Nord Stream sabotage as a war against Germany and the European Union, in a way.
Why? So is there anything Germans can do to upset the apple cart in their favor again, or are they so self-hating? Because they've been brainwashed in their culture to just utterly hate themselves because of what they did in World War II. But that kind of generational guilt is despicable to carry that on to other people that had nothing to do with that. But do they have any options to protect themselves in this scenario of being mowed over by America?
It is very difficult in the short term to see alternatives. They have another problem in Germany. The Greens, which are the environmental crazies, I call them, have literally they are responsible in large part for the problems that are facing Germany now, because they've systematically wanted to shut down their coal-burning plants. They've systematically shut down their nuclear plants. They were spending massive amounts of money, subsidies for windmills and solar. And if you've ever spent much time in Germany, when I was in Germany as a soldier, we used to, the joke was, did you enjoy your summer? And what you would say is, no, I had duty both days. I mean, that's how little summer there is. So, there's not a lot of sunshine in Germany. So I don't know what solar is going to do for them. And the wind does not blow all the time in Germany. It's not a particularly windy place. So if you cut out all of if you insist on this doctrine or this fanaticism of the green thing, the green revolution has also been something, and now we have a Green Party quasi in power in Germany. So I don't know what Germany is going to do, but what they need to do is they all need to sit down. I think if it is true that there has been a strike against the union, that we're going to see a whole new dynamic development.
It's very interesting times. We're seeing a realignment in the world stage that we haven't seen since World War II, really.
That's exactly right. I mean, just think about it. I mean, if the three gas supply routes to Western Europe were cut off simultaneously, at the same time, a new gas pipeline was opened to Poland on the same day. The Baltic pipeline came into operation. And the two Nord Stream pipelines are shut down, blown up. while the maintenance of Turkish Stream was interrupted. So this is the most destructive sabotage in history.